Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the Saints Insider Podcast. It is Thursday, February the 15th. We've passed the Super Bowl, Mardi Gras, Valentine's Day last night, and now we kind of begin the long slog of the offseason. All the good stuff's over already. Maybe.
Yeah. I think we're all still coming down from Mardi Gras a little bit. This is like I saw somebody post like this is like the really their official first day of the new year. Kind of feels like that for me too.
As you can tell by the looks on our faces.
It's still we're still in recovery mode, but we wanted to get a Saints Insider episode in, so we're back. We will be back every week of the off season with at least one episode. That's our goal, is to do at least one a week. Probably some weeks we'll do more than that. Certainly around the draft and once we get closer to the season. So. Lots to talk about. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel, and we'll post videos throughout the offseason as well when the Saints have interviews or when they have some practices, OTAs, things like that. So subscribe to the channel. You'll find all the podcasts and all the videos as we go forward. You can also find our work on NOLA.com/Saints. So that's Rod Walker. I'm Zach Ewing, Luke Johnson, and Matthew Paris. And lots to talk about today. First off, Jeff Duncan's not here, but we'll mention this at the top. Some breaking news from Jeff this morning. The Saints are moving training camp to Irvine, California. At least that appears to be the leader in the clubhouse. We're pretty certain that that's where it will be. Guys, we knew they were going to move it. There's construction on the facility at Airline Drive, so they have to move it. And it's a long way away, but in a lot of other ways, Luke, it fits. It's a good place weather-wise. It's a good place space-wise. All of those things.
Yeah, I think when we found out that they were going to be moving training camp because of the construction on the facility this coming summer, I think a lot of us kind of assumed that West Coast would be the place they go. They have traveled out there a couple times now in the last couple of years. The Chargers and Rams both have new facilities, so it kind of opened up some space out there for them to use that. And I know they looked other places, places a little bit closer to home, places on the East Coast, but yeah, it just didn't really make the same sense that the West Coast always made. So yeah, I mean, I think it's outside of the fact that it is a far away from home, the fans won't be able to see practices. I think a lot of it makes sense. You're not going to have to deal with the Louisiana summers, which unfortunately for Matt, he's gonna miss out on a couple of weeks of his first Louisiana summer. But it is absolutely brutal. Last year was like one of the worst ones that I can remember covering. So I think just makes so much sense to be out there. Plus, I'm going to thoroughly enjoy myself in Southern California for a couple weeks.
Yeah, no doubt.
The over under 2 Dodgers games for you, or 3?
Yeah, I've never been able to make a Padres game while I was out there because it was always like such a short window. So I think I'm going to try to do the trifecta, the Southern California trifecta, and hit Dodgers, Angels, and Padres.
Well,
Absolutely.
Let me know, because I'm in on that.
I won't let you know.
Rod, there's some portion of the fan base when the news broke this morning that said, the Saints are alienating their fans a little more. How could they go so far away? Nobody can watch practice. And I mean, I guess I understand that sentiment. For one thing, they had to go. And for another thing, if you're going to go because of the construction, you don't want to go to Jackson and deal with the same heat.
Wait a minute.
Rod would have been cool with Jackson.
I don't know why I had to. Jackson didn't need to catch a stray there, but you know what I mean.
No, I agree. But I mean, Saints fans getting upset, that's not a surprise, right? I mean, we knew when that news came out, there were people who didn't really read Jeff's article. They just saw the headline and say, they're alienating the fans, and that's not what they're doing. I mean, they have to move, and they're moving. And Luke mentioned the weather. I think that's a key factor. I got a chance to cover the camp when they went to West Virginia a couple of years, and the weather was absolutely perfect over there as well. And obviously the team didn't do well those seasons they were there, but I think that was all 7 to 9 seasons when they went to West Virginia. But this is a chance for them to. There's some benefits of them. In addition to the weather, I mean, this team gets to bond a little better, I think, when you're on the road and away from all the distractions at home. And so there's some benefits for it. And if the season turns out like Dennis Allen expects it to or hopes it will, I think this is something we'll probably see continue. I do think they're moving because of the construction, but I think if this team goes out there has a good training camp, have a good season. I think this is something that you can see going forward.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's kind of tricky to coordinate. Another thing that in Dunk's story this morning, which you can read on NOLA.com, is that the Saints it's their year for 9 home games during the regular season, which means it's their year for 2 preseason road games. And chances are they'll ask the NFL, hey, can we have our first 2 on the road, and can they be on the West Coast?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Seattle's nearby. You could play one of the LA teams like they played the Chargers last year. I agree with Rod's point, though. I think if you're installing a new offense, you want to focus on that, obviously, and having that kind of time away from home. I think that's been maybe a little bit overblown as the years have gone by. Teams are kind of actually traveling less for training camp now. Most are just doing it at home. But if you have this opportunity, I think it's great. And, I think the Rams site is now abandoned because they're moving. So there's like a logical kind of place for them to practice. So, I think it's a really wise move.
Yeah. And I think we've seen the Saints team spend a lot of time on the road in recent years, and I think a lot of that has proven to be beneficial. We saw them have to evacuate New Orleans for, 3 weeks, training camp a couple years ago when Hurricane Ida rolled through, and they were really good in that first opening stretch of the season. They start like 5-2 that year?
Yeah, that was the year
Before
Jameis got hurt. It was 5-2.
Yeah. And then we saw it again after Drew Brees got hurt in Los Angeles. They went and spent a week in Seattle, choosing to stay on the West Coast. I think the team bonded out there, and they ended up playing really well in Drew's absence. This is something that they have used to their advantage, I think, in years past, and they are a team that's willing to spend the money to go to Europe a week early, for the London games, to go hold training camp joint practices on the road in LA or Green Bay or whatever it is. And I think they have seen some benefits from it, even if like the Greenbrier years weren't exactly what you wanted.
Yeah, it's I guess the question, and Rod, you brought it up, if they keep doing this and if they do well, and I don't know, I think some teams go off every year. The Steelers do it. The Chiefs are in St. Joseph, which is an hour away. I mean, some teams do it every single year. The Cowboys go. Yeah. But I don't know that there's any tangible evidence, like statistically significant, oh, yes, teams that go off have a greater advantage. But if they do have success and they do decide to go back, there's sort of some political stickiness there with this. The taxpayers paid for the facility. They'd like to come see the practice. And the Saints would rather be out of the heat and not be forced indoors all the time. Do you foresee this being something they go back to, though, and just sort of try to smooth that over with the political part of it?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little early for that. To Rod's point, I think if they go out and have a great season following this, and then maybe it's part of the consideration. But I think it's a little bit too early to really consider that. The fact still remains, though, that it's not getting any less brutal to host training camp down here. It is a really, really difficult place to just get a football team ready in August. It sucks for us just standing out there watching it. Right. I can never imagine
being a 300-pound lineman.
Yeah, going out there doing a 2-hour practice in pads. Even the defensive backs and wide receivers who are just running all day. Those guys got to lose like 10 pounds of practice just in like water weight.
And then you have to get that back in you before the next game.
It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. It's why they spend a lot of time indoors, even though Dennis Allen, the Texas native, is like, I like being outdoors, like the toughness it creates. But you can't get the level of work in that you need to often around here. So even if it's not just like abscond for the entire period of training camp, I would anticipate them continuing to do at the very least a week of joint practices somewhere, just because it's a really difficult place to train.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Wanted to switch gears and talk a little bit about something closer to home with Mardi Gras just finishing, obviously, in carnival season. There's a couple of parades that kind of targeted Derek Carr, and that's normal, right? Like you have these satirical crews who like to do this sort of thing. I think, Matt, you were the one who was at the parade.
Yeah.
Tell us what you saw and then Derek reacted to it too. And I thought it was actually kind of telling how he reacted.
Yeah, so I think it was the Thursday night. There was the
Crew of Chaos, I think.
Yeah, Crew of Chaos, and it had Derek Carr, and like half his arm was missing, and he kind of looked like a zombie, and it said Derek Carr and the Red Zone Zombie, kind of poking fun at his red zone struggles earlier in the year, and it said 4th down and 90 million to go. It was a pretty fun float in terms of, it got laughs in the crowd. I was amused by it. It went, caught on Twitter, but you're making lunch one afternoon and then you see Derek Carr. You set your phone aside and then you pick it back up and you see Derek Carr is in your mentions. But he laughed it off. It was very Derek Carr-y. He's kind of tried to not embrace negativity. He's tried to be positive. And he said something along the lines of, shoot, that's how I was feeling for most of the season too, kind of referencing maybe the shoulder injuries he was having. And so, it was very on brand. He tried to keep it positive, tried to have a little fun with it. I don't know how much it did in terms of, hey, this is a likable guy. But with the fans, I think they're maybe still kind of that. But I did see some people in my mentions at least saying like, oh, like, nice job laughing it off, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that he responded. I thought he would just ignore it. But Rod, you said right away, like, that's the right way to. You have to kind of be self-deprecating, realize it's from a place of satire. New Orleans is not like any other place. I mean, this is the kind of thing that happens.
Yeah, originally I probably would have ignored it. Actually, just because it's Twitter and there's nothing you can say that people can.
Well, I didn't tweet out your float, so it's good.
the float making fun of Rod.
Making fun of Rod, yeah.
So that's the way he decided to do it. Like Matt said, some people kind of sided with Carr on that. So I guess that's good that he was able to, make fun. This is a place where you can kind of make fun of yourself. So
if you're a public figure in New Orleans and you're not perfect, you are going to get skewered in Mardi Gras parades.
And that float had like Dennis Allen and Mickey Loomis on it too. I kind of wish my original photo had more of the side shot of it. I only got the front, but on the sides it had like grave plots with like Mickey Loomis 2002 to question mark, Dennis Allen 2022 like question mark, like referencing, and then they had like ghosts that were booing. So it was fun on the sides too, but it was mostly. I think it's fair to say it was mostly a shot at Carr, but there were some other little Saints references in there too.
To me, it kind of shows that Derek is comfortable here, and obviously the team is committed to him, so he's confident that, hey, I can get past that year. He also had a second tweet where he said, hey, we were rolling. I think he used the word shredding at the end of the year. We just need to keep that going, which is obviously the right. Of course, you're going to stay positive. So now the question is, like, what's the probability of that happening with a new offense? And we can kind of transition into that too. The Saints officially named Klint Kubiak their offensive coordinator yesterday, and he is kind of filling out his staff. Got some new news about that just this morning. Rick Dennison will be a part of the staff. Also, Andrew Giannacco, I think I'm saying his name right, the quarterback's coach. Derek Foster, the running backs coach, and John Benton, the offensive line coach. How do you guys feel about how the staff is coming together? Obviously, we don't know for sure how these guys will work together or what they'll do, but it does seem like you're getting guys with experience, with a pedigree coming in.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting mix of young ascending coaches and experienced coaches who have like a lot of skins in the wall. Dennison was a part of the Super Bowl teams with the Broncos in the 90s as a coach. Benton has been around for a long time and has experience in a lot of really, I don't know if revolutionary is the way to put it, but a lot of respected offensive schemes, whether it's with Kubiak's Texans teams, with Kyle Shanahan's offense in San Francisco. So you got those kind of guys, and then you've got guys like Derek Foster, who only has 3 years of pro experience, but comes pretty highly regarded. Austin Eckler led the league in touchdowns 2 of the 3 seasons he was there. And then Giannacco was with Kubiak in Minnesota. I think another young guy, I think he's 36, if my memory is correct. Yeah. Both him and Kubiak are 36 years old. So, good mix of experience and youth. Obviously, Kubiak is the guy that's going to be pulling the strings behind everything, but it's good, I think, when you have a young coach to have some more experienced kind of people to advise him in those spots. So, obviously we're going to see how it all comes together, and I think sometimes with these staffs in the NFL, I think the thing you don't want to see is like necessarily like an all-star staff where it's like a lot of guys who are looking out for number one. So I think to me this is good. This is a good mix that they have on the staff.
I think it all comes down to Kubiak, though. I mean, I think sometimes we look at, and I don't want to downplay Derek Foster, but he's a running back coach. I mean, I don't know if he comes in and makes Alvin Kamara, who's been in the league, this is year 8 for Alvin, like he doesn't make Alvin Kamara all of a sudden become a better running back. But it's all going to come down to the schemes. I mean, I think Alvin Kamara is who he is.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, and I think sometimes it's window dressing, but it's also you want guys who feel comfortable with each other, who work well together, right. To your point, Luke, who, maybe in some cases know each other. Like I think Kubiak knows some of these guys from previous stops. Rick Dennison certainly.
Three of the guys we mentioned are Colorado State alums.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Shout out Fort Collins.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of them are on Minnesota's staff together. Even Clancy Barone, the tight ends coach, he was he's one of the holdovers from Dennis Allen's staff on the offensive side. He coached with Klint Kubiak in Denver, and I think Dennison was there at the same time. So, surrounding Klint Kubiak, who is a younger play caller, with guys that he knows, I think is helpful in this case. There is a nice mix of youth and experience there. But I think it's, it's not just guys that Klint knows to help him. It's also to help the players, by knowing this system kind of inside and out. I think it helps kind of teaching guys faster, or if they have a question about how things work, you want guys who know this system inside and out, and you look at the staff, and I think they've done a nice job of doing that.
It doesn't look like we'll get a chance to talk to Klint Kubiak probably before the Combine in a couple of weeks for you guys.
Yeah, we'll see if we...
Yeah, and maybe not even then, but if and when you do get a chance to talk to Klint, what's your first question for him?
Yeah, I think the question you've got to ask is what he wants the scheme to look like. I think that's really the big question that we have is he bringing over the San Francisco scheme? I mean, he was only there for 1 year.
Yeah.
I think Jeff Duncan mentioned this on Twitter this morning, that he kind of believes it's going to be this marriage of what they have been doing with some of the newer concepts, which I think is possible. I mean, they're still going to be learning an entirely new playbook, entirely new terminology, but you can kind of weld some of this stuff together and make it work. But I think that's obviously you're not going to get like a real answer as to exactly what the scheme is going to look like. But I think you can get the kind of broader vision of it, and not just guess and not just say, well, he's going to bring over the motions and the personnel groupings and the play action and all that stuff from San Francisco. It's like we don't know for sure what his offense is going to look like because he only had the 1 year under Shanahan.
Yeah. I think the one thing for me I'm curious about is just the usage of Taysom Hill. I'm just always curious about, you bring in a new offensive mind. Like, do you let him be this jack of all trades he's been, or do you put him in something that's more defined? So that would probably be my question to him.
Offensive coordinator Luke Johnson gives Taysom Hill 40 touches a game.
I mean,
minimum.
Maybe not minimum, but close. Look, he has to keep Taysom in that role, right? I mean, if he like says, no, you're a tight end. I mean, they tried to do that a couple years ago. I think that was Dennis Allen's first year when, the year before there was the Taysom versus Jameis, who's going to be the starting quarterback thing, and then at the end of the year, Dennis said, well, we're just going to move Taysom to tight end full time, and like it took like 6 games for them to move him back into being not less than that. It was the week of the Minnesota game in London that he started practicing at quarterback again. So, I mean, I just think that he's such a unique player. He's proven in that role. I think we saw this year that it didn't do Derek Carr any harm taking him off the field for 8 or 9 plays a game. You got to use that special thing that you have. The real question, I think, is just how long Taysom can keep doing it, because he's, right. I think, going to be 34, already is 34.
Constantly beat up, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that guy takes a beating. You see him after games, it's like he looks like he just walked off the set of a war movie.
It'd be a bit like, but taking him out of that role would be a bit like getting your hands on like a Justin Fields and telling him he can't run anymore. I mean, like you're taking away from the strengths of the player.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that he's gonna still do it.
Which, incidentally, the quarterbacks coach in Chicago, when they tried to do that, was Andrew Janocko, but that's neither here nor
Well,
there.
but there's 49ers offenses. This goes back to what we're expecting him to bring. Those 49ers offenses use their best players in ways that they best impacted the game. I mean, we saw a bunch of Deebo Samuel in the backfield and Christian McCaffrey out wide and kind of interchanging and using guys in non-traditional ways. So I would fully expect that to continue with Taysom Hill.
Yeah. Does it increase the importance of OTAs and these things, Matt, minicamp? I mean, because you now you're not just going back and kind of refreshing yourself and staying in shape. Like, you're installing an offense, and you ideally like to have most of that done before camp starts.
Absolutely. And, I think even going back to the Washington obligatory reference on the Cook pod, but
There was a reason I went to you for this. You've seen it before, yeah?
last year when they brought Eric Bieniemy in, they spent a lot of OTAs installing the offense, but then once training camp started, they kind of had to install it again just to make sure players knew it in and out. And, it was actually Washington's offense actually started okay and then fell off as the season went on. But, I think going back to Kubiak and what he's bringing here, I kind of am interested in what he learned in San Francisco, because he's had that experience in Minnesota calling plays. Even in Denver, they went to him as a play caller later. But does Shanahan have that magic touch? Did Kubiak learn to see defenses a new way? I was talking to Logan Paulson, another actually former Washington tight end, and he was saying how Kubiak does a really nice job of picking the right, or not Kyle Shanahan does a really nice job of picking the right coaches to bring in, and that's kind of why these guys have gone on to have the success that they have, is because they're really good teachers and they kind of learn things from him in that system of how to attack defenses. And so, is 1 year enough for that? I don't know. But I think with Klint Kubiak still being a young coach, I think it's kind of an interesting. I think he could actually really benefit from that year as their pass game coordinator and apply it here, but we'll see what he brings.
And going back to the OTA thing as well, I think we heard a number of players that end of season locker room clean out day say, and this is when we were having the big discussions about the culture thing, a lot of them were saying they want to see more buy-in early. So I'm going to be fascinated to see who shows up for those voluntary workouts and voluntary installs and all that stuff early in the offseason, because it's critically important for the offensive play caller to get his guys and up to speed on the playbook, yes, but like also for those guys to kind of build that rapport with each other again and get off to a faster start and not have to be in a position where you need to win 5 straight games at the end of the year to make the playoffs. I think that's going to be fascinating, the next couple months, seeing how that kind of unfolds.
I think for me, it's Dennison, the offensive line.
Yeah, run game coordinator. They're saying Rick Dennison maybe, but that's not confirmed.
But he has a reputation for being able to develop offensive linemen, and I think what he can do with Trevor Penning, if that's his role as a coach, that's something I think is very important for this team. I think Trevor Penning needs to be what he was projected to be when the Saints drafted him, and if they have somebody in here that can get him up to speed, I think that'll do wonders for this team and his offense.
Yeah, that's a great point. That could also determine what they do in the draft. Like, if you draft an offensive lineman and you're trying to get a young starter out of the draft, you want to get him up to speed. And so all of that stuff dovetails. It's a good transition into sort of, let's just take a kind of a 10,000-foot view of the rest of the offseason here. Now that we're, like you said, it's kind of, the new league year starts March 13th.
Yeah. So we're less than a month out.
We're not quite there yet, but it's as good a place as any to just kind of take a step back and look at what's going on here on the Saints Insider podcast. So first we'll have the combine guys, then we'll have a look at free agency and trades and salary cap maneuvering and all of that kind of stuff. And one thing I found it interesting, I think it was Fox Sports had a list of like the top 50 free agents, and there's other outlets that have done it. None of them are Saints. And for all 50 of them, they had a couple of teams listed as possible destinations, and the Saints were not listed as a possible destination for any of the 50. And that's a reflection of their salary cap situation and where they're at. But really, in a lot of ways, this team has to make a few tweaks, change the offensive scheme, and hope that what they have in the building is going to work.
Yeah. It's like Yeah, we talked about tipping point last year, but this is just a really interesting offseason. Just see what direction they take, because they are potentially moving on from a number of players who have been hugely important to this very successful run they've had from 2017 to 2020. They are bringing in a new offense that's going to require new players, new type of players, and we're going to get a sense of how competitive they think they are. The last several years, we've seen them, despite finishing with a record around 500, be really aggressive in managing the cap and in acquiring players. Will they continue to do that this offseason? Will they kind of shift the focus a little bit to try to maybe tamp back some of the future spending that they're constantly doing? It's going to be really very fascinating to see this whole thing play out. So I'm really curious to see what type of players Kubiak wants for his scheme, what type of players fit that, what type of players in the current Saints roster fit that. I'm curious to see what they do with Marshawn Lattimore, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara. Curious to see what happens with Ryan Ramczyk. There's so many different ways this thing can go.
Yeah, there will be a lot of headlines, and I'm just not sure we know what they're going to be. Possibly more players, more known players exiting than big name players coming in, Rod.
Yeah, but I think, but when you look at this roster, I mean, I think it all starts up front on both sides. They have to get better on the offensive line, and they got to get better on the defensive line, especially, well, just on the defensive line, period. So, to me, that's where it starts when it comes to looking for players.
Yeah, they do have players where you say, oh, that they got stars. They have Chris Olave, they have Alvin Kamara. Derek Carr's shown flashes at times in his career. He did it at times last year too. But if you don't have that up front game, it's not going to work. And then I think the other thing, Luke, that you mentioned is this culture, this buy-in. Are guys going to be bought in? And if they're not, maybe those are the first guys that you kind of jettison.
Yeah, I think that's if they do move on from some of these players, which is, again, an if, definitely not a sure thing. We all thought last year that Michael Thomas was gone, and then I know they worked very, very hard behind the scenes to keep him in place. But I think they went through this season and they didn't like where they were from the whole organizational standpoint. And I think that's gonna lead them to explore some difficult avenues with these players. They want the 100% buy-in in the building. And if they feel they're not getting it from everybody, it's less of an incentive to keep somebody around. So we'll see how it unfolds. I mean, I think it could potentially be very unpopular. Some of the players that we're talking about have not produced at this like super high level. So maybe their value around the league is not nearly as high as what people here value them as. But if that's the direction they want to take, and if that's the direction they think is best for the team, then there's not much anybody can really do about it because they're the ones making the decisions.
Yeah. I'm interested to see what they do at left tackle specifically. Andres Pete played pretty well. He's going to be a free agent. Do they want to bring him back? Is it even possible to bring him back? You mentioned Penning. I guess, James Hurst is still under contract, but he played better at guard. I know tackle's an option in the draft, but they could be gone by then because this is a very tackle-heavy draft at the top anyway. And so I want to see what they do on the front side of the line. And going back to what you guys were talking about Kubiak bringing in familiar faces, like I wonder even if a guy like Adam Thielen, who didn't really produce much last year with Carolina, is he a free? He's a free agent, right?
I think he signed a 1-year deal last year.
Yeah, so I mean, like even bringing him as a guy like a bit older, I'm sure he would come cheap to just be like, here's how this offense works. Could be maybe useful. I mean, that's just me speculating, but so guys like that who will come cheap, know this offense, and still have maybe a tiny bit of production left.
Yeah, the receiver thing will be like really interesting this offseason because I think we are all anticipating Mike Thomas is not going to be part of the team going forward. Things could change with that, as it did last year. But like, there's a lot of different ways you could look at this. You could be like, well, Hunter Renfrow didn't do anything in Vegas last year. He has a really good connection with Derek Carr. They were kind of tied to him last year. Maybe he's an option to acquire at a kind of a low price. I think you could look at the 49ers team and see somebody like Jawan Jennings, who's I think, a restricted free agent this year, so it might be kind of difficult to get him depending on where the 49ers tender him. But Juwan Jennings is somebody that had a lot of success in that 49ers offense as like a kind of a third down receiver, somebody who kind of profiles similar to Michael Thomas in terms of the frame and kind of the way his game goes with making the kind of tough contested catches. I think he'd be an interesting potential option. They could try to find somebody on the cheap like Thielen, although that hasn't really worked out for them in years past. Guys, but that's again, we're talking about a different scheme and different types of players. So I think it's going to be they're going to do something at that position this offseason. I don't think they're just going to go into it with Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and A.T. Perry as their top three. I think they're going to do something, but be fascinating to watch it, like which direction it ends up going.
Going on the other side of the ball too, you mentioned pass rusher. I think there's maybe a window there, depending on how much cap space they open, to take a flyer on somebody. Like,
oh, here it comes. I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
I'm predictable, but
say it.
Chase Young, former Washington, but he's the type of guy that he fits their profile of the type of pass rusher that they look for: fast, explosive, big, powerful, and he hasn't really. I thought he had a really good game in the Super Bowl. Actually, I was kind of surprised by that, but I think he still has upside. He's not the same type of player that he was after that knee injury. But if you're looking for somewhere to revive your career by taking a 1-year, $12 million deal or whatever it is, I think New Orleans makes a lot of sense given that they need the pass rushing help. And then even on the other side, if they want to go like cheaper, maybe Josh Uche in New England. I think that was the guy that maybe they looked at the trade deadline. He could be a Zach Bond replacement if they go in a different direction with that kind of undersized situational pass rusher. Those are two guys I think could help their pass rush anyway.
Saints do love former high draft picks who have not met their potential and trying to.
They got a bunch of them in the building, so I guess
like to
their own
try to squeeze more out of it.
Yeah. I mean, one thing's for sure, no matter what they do, they've made some unpopular moves already. Like, they're going to go into next season with a tremendous amount of pressure on them. There's just no doubt about it. And so maybe from the Saints side, it is a good idea then to be as far away from New Orleans as possible for training camp. Be ensconced somewhere else. Get your work done. And then when you come back, people are going to expect immediate success, or there'll be more Superdome scenes like there were last season.
That's right. That's the nature of the business in the NFL, man. They all know what they signed up for. There's a reason they make a whole bunch of money, right? Yep. It's to go out there and be scrutinized every step of the way. It's what comes with the territory. If they don't understand that, they are in the wrong business.
It's a do-good league, as they say. So you do good or you get out. And we will follow it every step of the way. Go ahead, Ron.
There was a Super Bowl played on Sunday. And we did some predictions before the Super Bowl.
He had to get it in there. Seriously, though, like, just stop picking against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs.
I'm done with that.
Which is what I...
which is what you said.
I did it for the AFC Championship game, but I was, like, so confident in the 49ers. And
the 49ers objectively should have won. I mean, you don't muff a punt. Christian McCaffrey fumbles in the first... All these things. But you could just kind of tell halfway through, right? Like,
they had a halftime, and it was... What was it, 10?
It should have been probably... It was... 10-3 at the half.
10-3, yeah.
But it should have been like 20-3.
Right.
And you're thinking this is not going to end well.
I got nervous when they went up 10-0. I said, "Oh."
Yes. Kyle Shanahan, his third double-digit lead in the Super Bowl, has won exactly none of them.
Yeah, but he keeps getting there.
Yeah.
And that's why Klint Kubiak and
he's a great coach.
Bobby Slowick and Mike McDaniel and his tree keeps growing and growing and growing. It's because he's brilliant. And one of these days he's gonna get the Super Bowl. I mean, Andy Reid
the job, yeah.
Andy Reid won. He just won his third Super Bowl, but like for a long time he was the Kyle Shanahan.
He was the bridesmaid. Yeah.
So Kyle Shanahan's gonna get his. He's way too good of a coach. It's just it's unfortunate for him that he keeps being put in this situation where he's got it right there. And then doesn't get it. And by the way, the Saints do go to Arrowhead next year, so they'll be playing the defending Super Bowl champions on the road. Don't think they're probably a candidate for that opening game. There's got to be better.
It'd be good symmetry though. You begin your season against New Orleans and end it in New Orleans for your three-peat. But I don't know if they do. That's not necessarily
I think they play the Niners next year, so they could do a rematch. I think they play the Bills again. I mean, like they got plenty of. They play Baltimore.
Ravens,
They got plenty of chances or choices.
Saints will be like the last choice.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many of those are home games.
I floated that theory out. You guys weren't really a fan the other day, but I'm bringing it to the pod anyway.
All right, we'll follow the offseason every step of the way here on the Saints Insider and on NOLA.com. We'll be back next week with a new episode. For Rod Walker, Luke Johnson, and Matthew Paris, I'm Zach Ewing. Check us out, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.